you so much for joining me. And I would like to welcome Anne-Laure Baluzet, a partner at Bain & Company. She's also the principal public sector and government, retail and social impact practices. And today we're going to talk about the future of work here in the GCC. Thank you very much, Anne, for joining me.
Thank you, Amne, for having me. I'm very honored to be here.
So recently you published a report about the future of work here. And would you be willing to talk to us a little bit about what are the trends that we're seeing in the GCC?
Yes, absolutely. Happy to do that. I think what's been interesting as part of this report is that we've seen similar trends to what we're seeing globally happen in the region, but sometimes with differences that are more accentuated here. One point that has come out quite clearly is that the pandemic has in general led talent to reassess what they want and what motivates them. I think a lot of us have gone back and thought about, what is our purpose and what is the meaning of life, and had these big questions. And in the UAE and Saudi, actually, 2 in 3 professionals are questioning their future plans and work-life balance. So essentially 2/3 of our professionals in the UAE and Saudi have been thinking about their future plans, what kind of jobs they want to take on, whether they're in the right career, and their work-life balance, and how to ensure they have more sustainability. So I think that has been a theme that has come out quite significantly. Another theme is that many of our professionals in the GCC and globally worry about how jobs can be automated and the impact of automation essentially on jobs. So what we found is, in the UAE and Saudi, about 60% of professionals believe that their jobs can be automated in the next decade, in the next 5 to 10 years. And more than 70% believe that they can cope with that automation, which is actually very positive, because in other countries, we see similar number of professionals that believe their jobs can be automated, but less that think that they can cope. So what that means is that we have a workforce in the GCC that is flexible, that is ready to respond to these future changes, and isn't living in fear of the change, but more, believing that, okay, if it happens, if my job is automated, I'll learn a new skill, I'll develop something else, and I'll be able to cope with the change that is happening through the automation we're seeing. And that really aligns with, what we found in the research, that if anything, automation makes the jobs more human, because it takes away the parts of the jobs which are less human specific and enables us as professionals to focus on things which really bring the human differentiation, whether that's the critical thinking, problem solving skills, or the empathy and human interaction skills that only humans can have. And so that's really a core belief of our research that we've conducted in over 20 countries around the world, and it's been very much validated in the GCC as well. There's a few other trends, but maybe I'll stop here in case you have other questions before sharing more.
It's quite interesting that they're not scared of automation, because usually people are scared of automation.
I know. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the reason for that, and I'll share a bit more about it in a second, is we have a workforce that on average is younger and that tends to like learning and developing new skills, and has a lot of hope for the future, given all the ambitious vision plans that we have going on in the GCC. So we believe that that has facilitated, this, let's say, optimistic outlook when it comes to automation and change versus a more fearful perspective.
Which brings me to my other question, is that, are we retaining talent in the region? Is the talent staying, or are we seeing a trend of, no, there are still people who are leaving more?
I would say in the last few years, what we've seen is actually more that the region has been a talent magnet, if anything, to be honest, especially in the last few years, given how our governments in the region have handled the pandemic so well, compared to many other regions. So I think there has been an attraction of talent. But of course, there is a global war on talent. So the big question is, this talent that has been coming in and is coming in, how can we make them stay on the long term and really view the countries in the GCC kind of as their long-term homes? And I think that's a question that most governments in the GCC are working on, especially in the UAE and in Saudi, trying to think about long-term retention plans for talent to ensure that it's not just a platform that we pass through to other destinations, but really a place where people can envision, retiring and being here for the long run, especially when it comes to top talent and skills, which are in demand globally. And I think another point that's important to think about, I know we think a lot about attracting global talent and bringing global talent, but given that, there's such a demand on talent today, especially in skills, which are things like, artificial intelligence and machine learning and many other skills that we just know there aren't enough people globally to serve the demand in those areas. We need to also think about how do we develop and reskill the talent we have within our countries to make sure they can, help us cope with that demand, and then also be globally competitive professionals, right? Because we've seen that, again, there aren't enough people with certain skills globally. There's a strong war on talent. There's countries that are, being very aggressive in how they approach different talent pools and how they plan and target different professionals in specific sectors. So of course, we need to also take part in that and continue to want to attract global talent. But we also have a very young population that has, incredible skills, wants to contribute and add value to the economy and to the vision and ambition that we're building here. So how do we also build on that to give them the right capability building programs, the right reskilling programs? And we've started seeing that, by the way, for example, in Saudi and in the UAE, we've started seeing corporates offering reskilling programs for specific skills that are more future-proof or future-oriented, that have been in high demand because they haven't been able to recruit as much of that talent from other countries. So they're working more locally, working on, internal, essentially, talent development programs, which have been quite successful from the ones that I've heard about.
Right. Are we seeing, are these governments here in the region using technology to actually blur how work is going to be taking place in the GCC? Because, as I said, a lot of the skills are actually related to technology. So how are we leveraging that to actually make sure that we have this talent pipeline?
What I've seen and has been very, very positive is I think the governments here have embraced technology, corporates as well, in doing a number of things, right? One is facilitating access. In the past, if you remember, traditionally, we used to have these global training programs or regional training programs where you have to wait for a certain date to go, and it's a bit complicated and you can't always make it. And you basically have more ad hoc training programs that used to take place. With technology, what we've seen is now knowledge is available all the time, actually at your fingertips, right? If you're a professional in a leading organization in the GCC, you can go on kind of your virtual university platform, virtual knowledge platform, whatever it's called, depending on your entity, and very quickly access knowledge on the topics that you want. So we've moved from a system which was waiting for trainings, ad hoc kind of model to, on demand, essentially learning that's available. And I think that's been a very positive change, because not only does it mean that you get to access the knowledge when you need it, it also means more people can access that knowledge. And, it's enabled essentially organizations to train pools of talent in different ways that maybe they wouldn't have been able to in the past. One example of that is we've seen a lot of organizations do digital savviness trainings, for example, for all employees, regardless of roles. So it changes a bit the way I think governments and corporates think about, who has access and how much do we want to expand kind of the pool of learning, and what are some skills that are fundamental that everyone needs to have. So these have been, I think, massive improvements, and it's democratized in a way knowledge and access to knowledge, which is very positive.
Right. I want to, wrap up the interview by asking more questions on the culture of change within the workforce here in the GCC. And with all this new talent coming in, retaining talent, and all the changes that are happening now, are we also witnessing a culture change in the region, or is that taking place slowly?
No, I love that question. And I can share maybe a couple of data points also from the report that really can answer some of your questions there, if that's okay. I think what we've seen is a lot of current HR systems think about talent in a one-size-fits-all model, right? It's one kind of view on unified career tracks, unified working hours, engagement models. And it's interesting because if you look at other sectors, I mean, we all buy different products, water, drinks, shampoos. Let's say consumer products, because that's something we can all relate to. There's a really strong understanding in those sectors of the power of segmentation, right? Most of the consumer products companies don't think of the consumer as one, but they look at the consumer in different segments. There's people who like to shop frequently, people who do less. These are their motivations for shopping versus others. We haven't yet brought that power of segmentation in many entities to HR. So I think this is something that absolutely needs to change. And it is something, to be honest, that is valid globally and that we're starting to see emerge, right? So essentially, why do firms who know what motivates us, who we work for, who we spend hours and days, working for, how can they start thinking more about us as individuals, segments, to offer more of that personalized offering? The study that we conducted, as mentioned, we've done it in over 20 countries and we've surveyed about 40,000 workers. So it's quite a sizable effort. What was interesting, just so you get a sense for the culture of work, in the GCC versus other countries, because there are a couple of differences that are worth highlighting. We've identified different types of professionals, essentially. We've taken that segmentation question and put that at the heart of our work. And there's different types of, approaches that people have when it comes to work. Some people, like myself, I'm a giver in the archetype. I like to work because I feel there's meaning, there's purpose. Other people work because they want to learn skills, and other people work because they're pioneers. They want to kind of disrupt the ecosystem and innovate. What's been interesting is when we've done the survey, we've seen similarities in different countries, especially in emerging markets. But in Saudi Arabia and the UAE, we have a lot more givers and pioneers than other regions of the world. We have more people that find meaning in helping others, that are not just motivated by money, but actually the meaning and purpose of what they're doing, and pioneers who are on a mission to change the world, really ambitious, risk tolerant, more independent. And I think that's a very optimistic outlook to have this kind of culture versus what you see in other regions where these kind of archetypes or these models of professions are a little are a little bit less developed. This helps us to appreciate that there's different employee types, different employee models, and we need to think about it in a very targeted way rather than a one-size-fits-all model. The last thing I'll add, which I thought was very interesting for the GCC versus other countries, is that more than 90% of employees in the GCC want a hybrid working model with at least one day working from home. And actually over 40% of those want to be able to work from home 4 or 5 days. That's actually much higher than what we saw globally. So again, there's that flexibility element that comes in for the GCC. And, the interesting and unique thing about the region is generally, while compensation is the #1 driver mentioned in the region and globally at around 56%. So 56% of our professionals surveyed in the GCC see compensation as the #1 driver, and that's aligned with global averages. What is unique here is that the second most important driver is learning and growth. So we have a population that is ready for change and that wants to learn, wants to develop, and doesn't look at learning as something you do once in a while, but an ongoing process. And I think that positions us really well for the future as well.
I think it's really interesting because I would imagine there's this reputation that people here are just for compensation and not learning. So that's actually very interesting. And thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I think thank you for giving me this opportunity. If anything, I think the research we've done has given me a lot of optimism about the future, because clearly we have people who, want to take part in the learning and the changes that are happening, want to be future-proof and prepared for the future, and are actually excited and optimistic about it as well, not just looking at it from a place of fear. So it's a very positive message, and hopefully we can build on that in the next few years.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.